the house I had to sell. I woke up early that morning. I lay still in my bed. I listened for a sound from the kitchen, but the kitchen was silent. All the pots and plates were already packed. They were packed the night before. I had lived in this house for over 20 years. This house had a staircase. It creaked on the 5th step. This house had a kitchen doorway. A few pencil marks sat on the frame. Nobody looked at them anymore. This house had a backyard. It was big enough for 2 children to run. My 2 children were grown now. They moved to 2 different cities. They found good jobs there. After I retired, money became tight. The roof needed repair. The pipes needed repair. The yard needed cutting every month. It was too much for one person alone. I still made 2 cups of tea every morning. I only drank 1. It was a habit I had not broken yet. Outside my window, the street woke up slowly. A dog barked 2 houses down. A car door closed somewhere. The same sounds, every single morning, for 20 years. I knew them the way I knew my own breathing, without really thinking about them at all. 3 days after I listed the house, the phone rang. I was pouring my tea. The agent's voice was cheerful. She said a buyer had agreed to my price. She said they wanted to move in next month. I stood still. My tea was still hot in my hand. I said only a few words. "Okay," I said. "I understand." I put down the phone. I looked around the living room. I had 3 weeks. I had 20 years of things to pack. A note with the buyer's number sat on the kitchen table. I did not put it away. Not that afternoon. Not the next morning either. 3 weeks later, I started to pack. I began with the living room. Each morning, I took 1 picture frame off the wall. I wiped the dust off the glass. I wrapped it in paper. I set it in a box. The first frame showed the day we moved in. I was younger then. I stood smiling by the front door. The second frame showed my older child's first day of school. She wore a red backpack. It was almost bigger than her. The third frame showed a birthday party. The colors had faded a little. 6 candles sat on a cake. 2 small hands reached for it. The fourth frame showed a summer trip. We stood on a beach somewhere. Everyone was squinting at the sun. The 5th frame showed no special day at all. It was just dinner, on an ordinary night. People laughed at the table. I packed frame after frame. Each one took longer than I planned. I told myself I would move fast, but I kept stopping to look. By the end of that day, the living room walls were bare. Pale squares marked where each frame once hung. I stood alone in the empty room. I heard nothing, not even my own footsteps. That night, I called my old friend Grace. We had known each other for 30 years. She offered to help me pack the next day. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "I know," I said, "but I think I need to." She came anyway. The next morning, she brought 2 cups of coffee. She brought a roll of tape too. Before Grace arrived, I lay awake and asked myself a question. Why did packing 1 box make me feel lighter? Why did the same box make me feel heavier at the very same time? I did not have an answer. I only had an empty living room. I only had a line of boxes by the door. That same week, I called each of my children. I told my older daughter first. "I'm selling the house," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "The house," she said. "Our house. It's just too much for me alone now," I said. "I know," she said softly. "It makes sense. I just wasn't ready to hear it." I called my son the next day. "About time," he said, trying to sound light. "That place is huge for 1 person." "It is," I agreed. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice suddenly serious. "I will be," I said. "It's just a lot of boxes right now." Both calls ended the same way. Both of them said they would visit before the move. Neither one did. In the end, their lives were busy, and I understood that. I had raised them to build lives of their own, far from this street. Grace and I went to the garage first. Old tools hung on the wall, untouched for years. In one corner, I found my father's handsaw. He had given it to me long ago. I wiped the dust off the handle and set it aside. It sat on the workbench, away from the boxes. That's an old one, Grace said, looking at the saw. It still works, I said. I checked it yesterday. I did not know yet why I wanted to keep it close. I only knew I was not ready to pack it away with the rest. Behind the tools, I found a small box of old postcards. They were from family trips, years apart. One showed a mountain. One showed a lake. One was just a plain blue sky. On the back was a short note, in my own handwriting. I did not remember writing it. Grace read it out loud, and we both laughed at how young I sounded. Grace and I packed my children's old bedroom together. Their room had 2 beds, side by side. Under one bed, we found an old shoebox. Inside were crayon drawings, dozens of them. Suns with too many rays. Houses with crooked doors. 2 stick figures holding hands. I sat down on the floor. I did not plan to sit. My knees just gave out slowly, and I let them. Grace sat down beside me. She picked up one drawing. Look at this one, she said. It says, for Mom, on the back. I did not remember that drawing. I did not remember most of them. But my children had made every single one. We stayed on that floor for almost an hour. The closet still held old toys. A wooden train with 3 broken wheels. A stuffed rabbit with 1 missing eye. A puzzle missing half its pieces. I put them in a box marked keep. I did not touch the box marked give away. Why keep a rabbit with 1 eye? Grace asked, smiling. I don't know, I said. I'm just not ready to decide yet. That evening, after Grace left, I thought about the question from the night before. Why did I feel both lighter and heavier with every box? I told myself it was simple. It was just dust and tiredness. Packing all day was hard work for a body my age. That had to be the reason. I decided it was enough of an answer. But it did not feel like the whole answer. The next Saturday, I held a small sale in the driveway. Strangers walked through my house that morning. They picked up chairs. They picked up lamps. They looked at furniture that had sat in the same spot for 15 years. A young couple bought the dining table. They loaded it into their truck carefully. This is a beautiful table, the woman said. Does it have a story? I paused. Every dinner we ever had, I said. That's the story. She smiled and thanked me again. An older man bought the bookshelf from the hallway. He shook my hand before he left. Good luck with the move, he said. Thank you, I said. Take care of it. By the end of that day, half the house looked different. I had known these rooms my whole adult life. Now they held empty spaces. Furniture used to stand there. I walked through the driveway once everyone had gone. A few chalk marks from price tags still sat on the concrete. I swept them away slowly, one by one. On Sunday, Grace came back to help with the yard. We walked past the small tree near the back wall. I remembered planting it. I planted it the same week we moved in. It had been a thin, weak little thing back then. Now it stood taller than the porch roof. A rope swing used to hang from the lowest branch. It was gone now, but I could still see 2 thin marks in the bark. The rope had rubbed the wood there for years. I stood there for a long time, holding a garden trowel. I was not gardening. I was just standing. Do you think they'll keep the tree? I asked. Or cut it down for more lawn? I don't know, Grace said gently. You won't get to choose that part. That's the hard part, I said, letting go of the choosing. A bird landed on a low branch. It looked at us. Then it flew away. I put the trowel down. We went back inside. The next week, Grace helped me pack the kitchen. We took every plate down from the shelves. We wrapped each one in newspaper, one by one. The shelves grew empty, one row at a time. On the last day in the kitchen, I needed to hang a small sign. The sign said the house was sold. I walked to the doorway to hang it there. And that was when I saw them. Small pencil marks sat on the door frame. Lines, one above another, climbed up the wood. I had walked through this doorway every single day for 20 years. I had never really looked at it. Not once. Not closely. Now I looked. I really looked. Each line had a date beside it, written small. Each line had a name, in different handwriting. Some lines were written in my own careful hand. Some lines were written in messy, excited handwriting, clearly a child's. One line sat higher than the door handle. Another line reached almost to my shoulder. The highest line was from just last year. My son had visited for a holiday. He was 31 years old by then. We had marked his height anyway, as a joke. He had laughed and called it silly. But he had stood straight against the frame and waited while I drew the line. Grace stood behind me, quiet for a moment. "You made these?" she asked softly. "We all did," I said. "Every year, on their birthdays." I touched the marks with my fingers. I could feel the small dents the pencil left in the wood. Afternoon light came through the window behind me, warm and low. It fell right across the frame. Every small line stood out clearly in that light. 20 years, standing in this doorway. And I had never truly seen this until now. I did not hang the sign that day. I stood there instead, one hand on the frame, until the light outside changed. Grace left soon after, quiet and thoughtful herself. She hugged me at the door. "Almost done," she said. "One more week. One more week." I repeated. 3 days before closing, the buyers came for a final walkthrough. They were a young couple, expecting their first child. They walked through each room carefully, measuring walls, discussing paint colors. "We're thinking blue for the nursery," the woman said. She stood in what used to be my daughter's room. "It gets good morning light," I said. She always liked that. The man knocked gently on the kitchen doorway. "Solid frame," he said. "Good bones in this house." I almost told him about the marks. I almost pointed to the small lines near the top. But I only smiled and said nothing. They shook my hand before they left. "Thank you for keeping it in such good shape," the woman said. "It was a good house," I said. "I hope it's good to you too." I watched their car pull away. Somewhere in that house, a new set of marks would start soon. They would climb the very same doorway, a few years from now. That last week, I packed my own closet too. Shirts, coats, old shoes I never wore anymore. It was slow work, but it was simple work. No drawings fell out of the pockets. No dates were written on the sleeves. For an afternoon, packing felt like nothing more than packing. That night was the last night in the house. Almost everything was gone. Only a few boxes remained by the door. My footsteps echoed through the empty rooms. I walked from room to room. One last time. I walked past the living room, bare and pale-squared. I walked past my children's old bedroom, empty now, the shoebox already packed away. I walked past the back door. I could see the tree in the dark yard. I climbed the staircase once, just to hear it. The 5th step still creaked, the same as always. I stood on it a moment longer than I needed to. I stopped at the kitchen doorway. I stood there in the dark, looking at the pencil marks again. Movers would come in the morning. New owners would come after that. Someone would paint over this door frame. Someone would sand it smooth. These small lines would disappear under a fresh coat of white paint. I stood there for a long time. I asked myself, one more time, why this felt so hard. It was not the walls. It was not the roof. It was not even the yard. I understood it then, standing alone in the dark kitchen. This house was not what I was afraid to lose. I could always walk to this one spot. I could always say, this is where my children grew up. That was the thing I was afraid of losing. I had spent 3 weeks trying to keep the whole house exactly the same. I had never really let it go. That was the real answer. Not dust, not tiredness. Something much simpler, and much harder to admit. I walked to the garage. My father's handsaw was still on the workbench. It sat right where I had left it, weeks before. I picked it up. I walked back to the kitchen doorway. I looked at the marks one more time. Then I made my decision. I cut a small piece of wood from the door frame. I cut carefully, right around the pencil marks. My hands were not as steady as they used to be, but the cut came out clean. I wrapped the small piece of wood in a soft cloth. I placed it in my coat pocket. It sat close to my chest. The rest of the frame stayed exactly where it was. It was ready for new paint. It was ready for a new family. The next morning, a moving truck sat in the driveway one last time. 2 men carried the final boxes out. I stood on the front porch and looked at the street. I had walked down it thousands of times. The same mailboxes. The same old street lamp on the corner. A neighbor waved from her window, and I waved back. Then I signed the last papers. I handed over the keys. I did not look back at the house as I walked to my car. I did not need to. What mattered most was already in my pocket. My new apartment is smaller. It does not have a creaking staircase. It does not have a backyard. But it has one small wall near the kitchen. That is exactly where I hung the piece of wood. The pencil marks are still on it. Every morning now, I make 1 cup of tea. I stand by that small piece of wall for a moment before I drink it. I look at the little lines. I look at the names. I look at the dates. This apartment has a much shorter hallway. This apartment has a smaller kitchen. This apartment has no yard at all. But this apartment has that same wall of memories. I can see it every single day. I understand something now. I did not understand it 3 weeks ago. A house does not hold your memories for you. It only stands there while you make them. A small piece of wood, carried in one pocket, can hold just as much. Some mornings, I still reach for a second teacup out of habit. I catch myself, and I smile instead of stopping short. The habit does not feel so heavy anymore. It just feels like mine, and it is so much lighter to carry. Thanks for staying with me through this story. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more stories like this one. I will see you in the next story.